me being able to successfully mentor, 5 junior engineers has huge value to the company. And me being able to, like interact or sell my ideas to a customer, that has huge value as well, right? So I think don't discount that. And tied to that is, like that's why we're trying to make like the tech industry more diverse and equitable and inclusive towards, women and underrepresented minorities, etc. So don't become one of those software engineers who is not like anti-DE&I, but like not embracing the effort. Like the effort does move the industry forward.
Hey, Dennis, welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, great to be here and happy we could get this interview in. So.
Perfect. So let's get started with tell us where you're living at the moment in the world and what you're currently working on, who you're working for, and sort of what your responsibility is there.
Sure. So I'm in San Francisco, California. So in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. I've been here for the past 13 years. Right now I work for this company called VMWare. So VMware is pretty well known in like the IT world. So our customers are like pretty much every large enterprise uses VMware. So I've been at VMware for the past 3.5 years. So actually I was at a startup that got acquired into VMware. I've bounced around a few teams at VMware, and most recently I'm working in the office of the CTO in VMware's internal startup incubator program. So the program is they fund projects with, like a 12 to 18 month roadmap. So I'm leading a team. We're still a little bit in stealth mode, but it is in kind of the intersection of security and ML data science space.
All right, leading a team, stealth mode sounds quite exciting. And for the audience, can you describe essentially what VMware does? I don't think many people realize that they use VMware almost every day.
Yeah, definitely. So VMware is, like a company that was founded in the early 2000s to revolutionize computing. So essentially large companies used to have servers, physical servers and server racks in their, like labs, because to meet their computing needs for both in terms of compute and storage, they had, like large physical machines. A bunch of them were, like being underutilized a little bit because, physical machines, you may not be able to max out the capacity at any given time. So you end up buying, a lot more than you may need for different peak hours. So VMware was founded by a couple of people out of Stanford to virtualize servers, essentially. So like one physical server could act and look like 100 virtual machines, etc. So you get a lot of the processing power, and like the way to think of it is like a virtualized resource sharing mechanism. And really VMware is what paved the way for like what we call cloud computing now, which is like the next iteration of completely abstract what these machines are. So VMware essentially invented, enterprise grade virtual machines.
Wow. And like I was saying, imagine you log onto a portal and you launch a machine, and that one machine, you could, as you said, you could have almost 100 machines on a single piece of hardware, depending on how beefy that hardware is. So you got acquired and you essentially got kind of pulled into VMware. So this question is kind of weird, but why did you choose to work there currently? Or did you have like a choice on what team you got to go on to? Or based on your skill set, they were like, hey, we need you to get this done here?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So the startup I was at before was called Bracket Computing. So we were in the cloud security space. So essentially, we wanted to develop solutions that allowed like really large enterprises, but they were security conscious to use the public cloud. So for example, like large investment banks, they want to run, their Monte Carlo simulations on public cloud, but, they have some sensitive data. So how do we make that happen? So essentially our startup was targeted at that space.
Okay.
Varying degree of success, but it was really a good fit with the VMware acquisition. Into the VMware already has like those big relationships. They have that trust factor. So our technology was acquired into a team into the security and networking unit in VMware. So that was where I initially was within VMware. But to be honest, one of the things about that excited me about VMware is like being back at a large company. So I started my career at NetApp, which is another like kind of like large enterprise company, is the ability to move around and go on different teams, learn new spaces, not have to worry about, just being like working on one product the whole time. So like,
yes,
if you're at a startup, you're obsessed about making that product work. You're all in on that to the extent where sometimes, you might not learn as much in like kind of general or new fields. So it definitely pros and cons. So even though like I didn't have a choice into being acquired by VMware,
right.
I chose to stay there because of the internal mobility. So I actually switched to a few different teams. One of the big areas that VMware wanted to focus on was Kubernetes, which is container orchestration. And that was an area of interest to me, having used it. So like I actually worked on kind of the VMware Kubernetes offerings. So that's where I spent a couple of years working on that, and then kind of wanted to scratch the itch of the startup type environment, and was luckily able to find a fit in like the startup incubator at VMware.
So you're in a large company in an incubator within that company.
Yes.
And you've also been in a startup as well. How do you feel the difference between like just a pure startup focused on a single product versus a stealth mode startup within a larger organization? What have you experienced differently across them?
Yeah, so definitely I would say nothing really compares to like being a startup in its own company and kind of sink or swim mode, where like you only have a certain amount of dollars for a certain amount of months, and like the pressure that comes with that, and also you have to make a name with yourself with customers especially. So that is exciting and challenging. Within a big company in a startup incubator, a lot of it is similar in the sense that you get to develop stuff from scratch. You get to use new technologies kind of as you see fit, but a large part of it is also even trying to figure out if any other teams in VMware has some work in this area that you may be able to pull in, like kind of just free intellectual property to use in your project. And the good part of it also is that like, you already have meetings with all these large customers. You don't need to like go get a meeting with Goldman Sachs or whatever, right? Like VMware already has a whole account team there. You kind of just tell the account team, hey, like, can you like run this idea by like we working on this particular piece of the product? Like, what do you think about that? Get feedback. So a lot of it is pretty exciting there, and that all the doors are open for you.
Okay, so you can penetrate into a lot bigger customers a lot faster.
Yes.
And I guess probably decide whether or not you should be doing it, right?
Right. Yes.
Great. So we do the show to encourage people from the Caribbean region to pursue data-driven careers. That can be things in data science, machine learning, data engineering, anything, data analytics, whatever the case may be. And one of the things I like to make sure that we highlight in the show is that all of this stuff is not, like all the machine learning stuff is not possible without tech, without the software engineers, the hardware engineers, standing up all of that infrastructure to make sure that you can do a bunch of different things. So within your purview and your expertise, what do you think is the impact of all of this technology on the Caribbean's future? And what should people at home maybe be thinking about, given the perspective that you have of being in the Bay Area, where that's where the biggest innovation tends to happen?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like data science and machine learning, I would say, is even more broad ranging in terms of industries than, traditional kind of tech software stack, because it really does apply to a bunch of different industries. So like when I think of like Trinidad and like the petrochemical industry and things like that, and, like even, oil discovery, etc., like a bunch of it is already a large amount of data that it has been processed and has been used in some regard. So what data science and machine learning tries to do is kind of apply some well-known like techniques to, filter through the noise, make informed decisions. So I think a bunch of industries in the Caribbean, like you think of tourism, you think of, the petrochemical industry, you think of, stuff generally related to environmental and climate things. You do see more ML and artificial intelligence in that space, right? Like, so I think that's where we can think, like in almost all industries, you can apply some aspect of data science and ML to it. So that's where I think a lot of the interest in the Caribbean should be. And you don't need to, like know the full tech stack to be able to do something with it, right? Like
Yes.
tech has advanced to the point where, like someone in the Caribbean, can spin up an instance on AWS, or like spin up a database on AWS, or, like use S3, like all these things are kind of there available for you. So in terms of the compute, the storage, etc., is already like kind of accessible, and it's accessible now more than ever. So, if you think 10 years ago to run like a big data project would be a big undertaking, and you need like a lot of upfront cost. Right now, you don't need as much, right? Like,
yeah. So you could probably in maybe a couple of weeks figure out, okay, I should do this idea or not do this idea.
Yeah.
And probably the only thing limiting you is maybe your knowledge of the cloud environments if you've never worked with them before. And the internet's a big place, so you can probably learn some of that stuff, right?
Yes, definitely. And I would also add like the kind of emergence of open source software and embracing it. Like you even see large companies embracing and using it now. It's become a lot more mature, and a lot of focus on like getting the community involved. So I would urge people in the Caribbean to look at open source projects and look at being able to contribute. Really, there are no barriers to entry other than kind of just like interest and ability to learn. So I would say open source projects are things you can go online, you read the contributing guide, you figure out things that you may be able to help with, and you can kind of immediately do it. This is not like a job that you need to interview for and things like that. So I would urge people to look, because it's a lot more accessible than probably people would think.
It's a good point that you bring up, because I've been thinking about how do you get folks at home more experience on a global level, on global tech stacks, especially machine learning. And I like the fact that you bring up open source, because it just, like you said, hey, I'm willing to contribute my time. You're not getting paid, but you can put that stuff on your resume as a high schooler, college person, professional at any stage. And you can definitely build some very interesting career capital, but also a global network of contributors as well. So yeah, that's great. Do you contribute to some open source in your spare time, if you have any?
Yes, I do.
I guess.
I have. Okay. And at VMware, I've also like led kind of some of the open sourcing of our internal projects. So cool. We have projects that we want to be community driven. Like a lot of people use VMware and they might develop like some scripts or something to make some parts of the VMware stack better. And open source is just a way to like put that into a common space, maintain it, and be able to have other people contribute to it. And actually in like when we do interview people and hire, we do actually like pay a lot of focus. Like if someone has done open source work, it reflects very well on their skill set and their interest in learning. So but I'm also kind of like I should be doing more in the open source community myself.
Me too. I've always wanted to contribute to an open source project. I think I've just looked at it and been like, okay, I have probably something else to do. And So
Yeah.
definitely don't follow my example, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah. And yeah, and like I would urge people to even, like start, like even if you start a project, consider developing it in the open as well, like on a public GitHub account. Like you might start like a hobby project, but other people may be interested in it. And it's a really good way to get collaboration, to get feedback on things. So I think that's like a good way for people in the Caribbean, and even like us, we should consider,
Yes.
doing some of
And
that.
make sure you're not I guess a single individual, a multifaceted individual. And I think what's cool there is the access to different jobs that you can get on an open source project. So if you're on a really popular project and you work your way up to a contributor and part of the I guess the decision making team, a lot of those people work at really large companies, some of the top companies, and you can be like, hey, I'm looking for a job. You might be at home in the Caribbean, but you're a big contributor to a particular open source project. And I think when people see value in your work, you never know kind of what can happen and what opportunities you can get.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. So in the first segment of the show, we kind of like to dive into your career journey. You've gone to, the top school, one of the top schools in the world, MIT.
I thought you
But
were going to say Naprima College.
well,
Yeah.
no, CIC, no, not Prima, BCIC. So yeah, tell us about your sort of high school days and what led you to study certain things. Were you always, let's say, more on the science, let's say science inclined versus, let's say, business, some of the other topics? And what were your strengths, weaknesses? Were you a studious student? Were you a slacker? For instance, I was a slacker, so just kind of interested to see, what your path was there.
Yeah. So, good question. So I went to Naprima College, and I would say I was mainly more science focused than art or things like that, business even. So I think kind of early on I knew that like science is something I wanted to do.
Okay.
Kind of was good at math, and focused a lot on there. But early on, so my dad introduced me kind of to the IT world. So he used to teach at computer science at San Fernando Tech, and then later on did IT at UE. So he kind of brought me up about a lot into the IT world, and he actually did a bunch of IT training and used to do PC repairs kind of on the side. So
Okay.
I assisted him with that. We'd go around to different people in the neighborhood and fix their computers and things like that. And
Yes.
and that was also like in the 90s, early 2000s, where you would buy computer parts and build. So that was big at that time. So we've built a fair number of computers, etc. So
Okay.
that was kind of my initial introduction. And then actually I decided like, let me try this programming thing. So probably like at age 13 or 14, I found my dad's old books from his days in UE, which was, a while ago, learning like BASIC and Pascal and things like that. So I started programming there. Did IT at Naprima College in for CXC. Did like the programming track, and started programming some games and etc.
Wow.
And then
all right.
My dad put me in touch with the late Dr. Noel Kalicharan from UE, who was a lecturer there. So he ran the local computer Olympiad team that so actually I got into training with a couple other really talented programmers within Trinidad, and we represented Trinidad in the International Olympiad in Informatics in 2003, I believe. So
nice. Wow.
that was my first exposure, and like going to that and seeing kind of people my age all over the world. Like obviously we were very junior and like very green, but it was an amazing experience.
So did you see some real top-notch programmers at your age?
Oh
all across
yeah.
your Okay.
Yeah, like
what country was what top 3 countries you say were the strongest in terms of their students?
I would say probably like Korea and China, India,
Okay.
America were probably like the biggest sets, because a lot of the questions were like algorithmically focused.
I
So
see.
at that point in Trinidad, it's difficult to get to that level of algorithms, because we didn't really have like the exposure to learn as many things. But it was
Okay.
still good to kind of go there and you know see
Yeah,
all.
and just see people from all over the world actually programming, and that's that's quite something when you're at that age and you see people globally your age programming. I personally didn't have sort of that type of exposure nor perspective. My dad had a computer company, so in my house, like we were building the networks, all that stuff, but I just as a slack, I couldn't really care for whatever reason, looking back. So if your parents have a particular technical skill or in IT or whatever the case may be, definitely pay attention to what's going on there. I think you can definitely accelerate certain things in your career,
Yeah,
given some types of knowledge, right?
yeah. And then my older sister also studied, like computer science at UE. She's an IT teacher at Naprima Girls. My younger brother is a programmer as well.
All right. So it's in the family. That's cool.
It's in the family, yeah. So that's kind of what guided me there. And then luckily I was able to get into MIT, and MIT was, great, but also like like next level. Like you come in and you have people who have been programming since they were like 10 and like really advanced. So the even like the intro to computer science class at MIT was at that point like notoriously hard, like kind of a weeding out class.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that you're able to pass the class. So
Yes, with great effort and determination, but yeah.
Why did you sort of choose MIT? Did you apply to other schools and get in, or you had applied to a bunch and MIT was kind of the one that accepted you?
So when I was doing A levels, so in when I was in upper six, my kind of the plan was always to take a gap year and do SATs and apply to schools, etc. But my dad suggested, why don't you just take SATs, just kind of without much prep and
see where you're at.
Yeah, or like make it like the first attempt or whatever. But like I did well enough that we considered, let's just apply to one school. So I applied to MIT. Applied to MIT. The biggest issue then was, like whether we could like actually afford it. But MIT had, need blind financial aid.
Wow.
So I was able to get a large amount of funding from MIT and get in. And then actually when A-level results came out, I ended up getting a government scholarship anyway. So I was able to use that, but I had already started MIT at that point.
Nice.
So to answer your question, just MIT, but the plan wasn't that. It was to apply to other places as well. But I kind of knew early on that like MIT was the place I wanted to be. So.
Okay. Oh, you're bad. All right. So again, MIT on your first try. And I think it's good for maybe the students listening, if you have that particular type of aptitude, like you're saying, maybe just take a chance and see what happens, right?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And like there are a few other trainees in my year, and like MIT has always kind of had a stream of trainees. And like talking to the admissions office, they always are impressed by the level of education of the Trinidad school system. So keep that in mind. I know like people like I didn't know in Trinidad that we were doing things that were kind of advanced to like A levels. In some regards is like a higher level than some APs, etc.
Okay.
So
AP is advanced proficiency, right? Is that what that stands for? Okay.
Yeah, in America. So the admissions office was always like, we love getting trainee applicants. We love looking at, their applications because they kind of think highly of our education system. So I encourage people to apply, and don't get intimidated.
Okay.
Name on the schools.
And how much would you say of your extracurriculars played a role, or was it mostly like, what was the story that you told on your essay to get into MIT at a high level?
Yeah, at a high level, I think I was involved in kind of some extracurricular activities at Naparima College, but nothing too crazy. Like I was like in the Indian Cultural Club. I was in kind of
Okay.
our temple group that used to do a few different activities. But kind of the story I told in my application was similar to the one that I told you. Like I kind of grew up with my dad, like like going around repairing people's computers, building computers, and then like going from that to kind of self-starting, like programming on my own, going to the
Mm-hmm.
international Olympiad. So I think like that definitely helped a lot. But
Okay.
I think it was that kind of
Initiative or showing
initiative.
of initiative, essentially.
Yeah.
Great. So you're at MIT now. The first intro to computer science class you take, definitely stress you out, probably more than usual.
Yeah.
And tell us, what was your experience like at MIT in terms of the caliber of education? How did you adjust as a student, and just as an individual? How did you sort of change as you went along in your MIT journey, and how did that kind of prepare you for later on in your career?
Yeah, I would say like MIT was a tough adjustment.
Okay.
From a life perspective too, because you are
Mm-hmm.
moving to like Boston, cold,
Cool.
living by yourself, all these things. But
Mm-hmm.
MIT has changed a little bit since I was there, but it's kind of known um, for being a little bit of a difficult school to do really, really well at, but they don't fail that many people. So like the
Interesting.
retention rate is like high 90s. So like people don't fail out at MIT, but it's really hard to get A's. So like
Okay.
they had like a big B philosophy. So like if you like did the work, whatever, you'd get a B. So um
Hmm.
and then their focus a lot, especially in computer science, and this has changed a little bit, was to teach fundamentals and not
As
like
much
languages
practical.
or practicality as much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like the first programming class, they taught us like Scheme, which is this like interpreted language that no one uses in industry really.
Hmm.
So, and the reason they use it is because it's an excellent teaching language,
Okay.
but it is like a big change, and like the tangible things you see that you build with it is a little bit different. Like they teach you how to build a compiler, which is cool, but it's not like something you can show off to your friends, or like you're not building an app or things like that. So
Yes.
it was a little bit more of a theoretical type of school then. Um,
Mm-hmm.
now they have implemented kind of more practitioner tracks and stuff like that, which I
Okay.
think makes it a little bit more accessible earlier on. But
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate having been like kind of the fundamentals kind of honed that they do there.
Okay. That did sort of help you later on, you would
Yeah,
say, right?
yeah,
Okay. And you get to the end of your bachelor's, and you're an international student at this point, correct? So you're on F1 visa.
yes.
Did you do anything on your OPT? And for those listening, OPT is like the 1 year work authorization you get to work in the US. Did you get a job at that point, or you just kept going straight through school?
Yeah, so good question. So MIT has this really cool program so they have a Masters of Engineering program that you can basically do with just one extra year at
Okay.
MIT, because you pretty
Mm-hmm.
much started a bunch of your classes, your senior year count towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And even within this Masters of Engineering, there are kind of two tracks. One is you could do like a research track, or you could do an industry track. So I did the industry track, where
Mm-hmm.
you work at a company and you do a thesis project there. So that's
Wow.
actually what I did.
Okay.
So I did that at NetApp, which is the company I had like most recently interned at. So they hired me for a particular project where it was a good intersection of industry plus academia. And both MIT and NetApp had a great working relationship, because they had a few alums there who set up this program that
Mm-hmm.
they would be able to help people match with projects, etc. So I did that MEng program. So I did kind of the first 6 months of that extra year on site in industry at NetApp, and then the last 6 months like taking classes, writing up your thesis. So I was
Okay.
able to do that. So that's kind of what I did in my I believe that was the 6 months of work counted as OPT.
Okay, I see. And then you got a full-time offer to
Yeah.
go there afterwards, and you decided to run with that, right? Correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay, so you joined NetApp. You have a master's in computer science from MIT. And what do you think was the adjustment from bachelor's to master's in terms of the level of workload, the support you get from professors, et cetera, et cetera? You want to share with the audience your experience there?
Yeah, I would say the class work, like the classes themselves, the level of difficulty didn't jump as much, but the kind of being able to write up a thesis or like a bigger research project was more of the like learning experience for me, because like the scope of projects you would do as an undergrad and your bachelor's is smaller and
a lot shorter in
a
time.
lot shorter. It might be a group project, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the master's thesis, you are kind of starting to, push the boundaries of research into like you don't want to have a thesis that looks exactly like somebody else's thesis.
Yes.
So it's not like the level of a PhD thesis, but you do want like some level of novelty of research in there. So yeah.
And did you have to publish that in a conference, or you were able to just, go in front of a committee and your advisors, they're like, okay, this is decent work for a master's level, and you're out?
Yeah, that's basically what mine was. Some people did publish more widely, or like used it, especially for people who pursued academia later on, they used it as like the basis of their PhD research and etc. But yeah, for me it was kind of more narrow in scope, in the sense that this was also an industry, was based on a project I did at NetApp. So that's also interesting, because it's challenging to find something that matches both academia and industry. And
very challenging.
Also, like with these companies, you can't go like publish their proprietary data,
True.
etc. So, and like their proprietary IP. So actually I had to work with both like the patent team at NetApp and my professor, to kind of figure out, where to draw the lines of what I could discuss or not. So.
Wow. And that's quite exciting that MIT has that program where you go right into a company. And do they find those companies for you when you apply to that program? And or were you talking to an advisor and he said, hey, you're in your master's, you're a good fit for NetApp? You see what I'm saying? Like, is it a professor level relationship, or is it an institution level type thing where, okay, we're just going to place you somewhere?
Yeah, it's both. So it's called like the 6A program. So 6 was the course number of like computer science, and then like the 6A program was this like associate program with industries. So they would have in our career fair that companies would come to MIT to hire. They would have companies say whether they're like 6A eligible, and
okay.
Some companies, there's like a minimal number of amount of groundwork that companies need to do to fulfill the criteria. But generally, like a lot of large companies did, so like Google, VMware, etc. But also, if a professor found a company that he or she thought that you would match well with, they would work to create a 6A eligible opportunity there. So
great, and it's good, at least for the students listening. That's one particular way to get into a company is through a school, through the internships that they gather. And I think you tend to see that be more well established in bigger schools like MIT and stuff like that. I think, for instance, at my school in Florida Tech, it wasn't. They did have some relationships, but maybe not as formal relationships with these large companies.
Yeah.
So NetApp, tell us about NetApp. What was NetApp sort of known for in the industry, and what did you sort of learn from your time there?
Yeah, so NetApp, essentially what they did was enterprise data storage. So, like all these large companies, had to store data, and, like at large scale, you can't just use like off the shelf hard drives, basically. So NetApp kind of was one of the initial companies to develop a like custom built appliance. So it was called network appliance. So that consisted of, a storage device consisting of hard drives, etc., with, RAID, like RAID is like the redundancy array. So to be able to, like persist data and, have it accessible over the network. So if you think of like saving a large amount of files, you would just save it to a NetApp device as opposed to, your local hard drive. And
I see.
And you get kind of backup, disaster recovery, etc., all those kind of storage based features on it. So NetApp was one of two big players in the industry at that time. So EMC was the other. So NetApp and EMC, pretty much all the Fortune 500 companies would use either one or both of NetApp or EMC. So
wow. And you worked on different internal applications there as a software engineer. What I guess if you can speak about it in terms of like, what did you work on, and what skills did you use? What languages were you programming in? And I guess maybe what career advice you have from that particular, like, what did you learn, like career strategy wise, from that particular job?
Yeah, good question. So for my thesis research project, I worked on something in the ML field. So at that point,
so you had started doing machine learning since back then.
Yeah. So NetApp used to collect support data and metrics from their devices. And we wanted to build tools that would kind of predict performance problems in the future based on these metrics. So I built like an internal tool that used kind of Bayesian networks to figure out if, you're going to, so essentially at the highest level, like whether you're going to run out of storage and when. But kind of some of the more advanced problems was, like when to, to refragment or defragment certain pieces of your storage stack, etc. So kind of being able to predictively do that in a form that is easy for the customer, in the sense that like they're already sending metrics out, they don't need to send anything else. We just look at it and, give a notification to the customer that, like you should do this. So that was my initial project.
And I think storage is quite an interesting field, because now I'm at NVIDIA and I'm learning a lot about, hey, when you go to train very, very large machine learning models, the speed of your network and your type of storage is actually one of the big driving factors into your performance versus number of GPUs and all that. Like storage, like if you can't pull the data fast enough, then you're going to be quite slow and spend a lot of money. So super interesting. And you stayed there for, I'm looking at LinkedIn, 6 years.
Yes.
And in that time, like I was saying, career-wise, what led you to join a startup after? And it looks okay, that was acquired by VMware, and you joined Bracket Computing. So tell us about that particular hop. Was that a connection? Did you just apply?
Yeah.
How did they find you?
Yeah. So at NetApp, I continued on. So from that project, I then started to work kind of more on customer-facing products. So just as like a software generalist, like I was working on like the management suite of software, which is just some application customers would install on their servers or on the desktops to be able to manage their NetApp storage. So to do just management tasks associated with it. So I worked on that for around 4 years, and I would say that's where most of the fundamentals of like my developing a customer facing application came from, understanding the trade-offs, understanding the software development lifecycle, fixing bugs, etc. So I think like, that's kind of where I gained my chops. And then like the last year at NetApp, I was kind of looking for a new challenge. So at NetApp, I also kind of joined one of their like internal startup E-type environments. So at that point, public cloud was, really starting to threaten the NetApp business model, like AWS. Why should a customer buy a NetApp device when they could use, like AWS for certain things? So we were coming from a world where customers would own their own server and their own NetApp device. And we were trying to transition to a world where they may not own their own server. They're using AWS, but they still want to use a NetApp device. So I worked on a project that was, integrating NetApp into AWS environments.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of a small startup team that I led. And I was like, this seems super fun. And actually, Bracket Computing had a few ex people from NetApp that I knew. So I kind of did that connection. And I interviewed them. It was a great fit. The company was, like super well funded at that point. The founders had already founded a previous startup that had a successful exit. So at that point, it was like, I was super excited to even get the chance to work there, and knowing the talent of people there, I was like, this is like a no-brainer for me. So.
Okay. And I think for anyone maybe thinking of always your next career move, I've heard different things from many different people, but it sounds like what attracted you was the caliber of your teammates that you get to work with was a big factor.
Yes. And I think that's kind of been like a consistent theme in my career, is that I always kind of want to be surrounded with people smarter than me or more experienced or more capable. Yes. And I think like everything and like in the sense that they're not arrogant and like good to work with, but always kind of put yourself in a learning and growing environment. And the other parts of it will, in my experience, like the other parts of it took care of itself in terms of like, I didn't worry too much about like, whether this company going to be a huge success, whether like I'm going to make a ton of money, like all those things. Like I think it's like so random that like I don't even think about those things. I think about whether this is a good environment to learn, and like whether like really good people go there, because I think like naturally they will tend to go to stuff that might be a good idea or successful. And then also, like if you have a good team, your chances of success higher. So
that's a great point. And I think most people, when they think about, all right, I'm gonna make my next jump, it's typically a financial type criteria that or lens that they put on top of it to be like, okay, is this good or not? Probably versus thinking of what is the quality of the technical team and probably to some degree the management team, right? I think that's kind of exciting. The founders of that company had already exited a company, so you already know, okay, they've done this before, they can do it again. And did you join that company thinking you wanted to learn how an exit kind of worked as well?
Yeah, I think like I was kind of interested in like all the aspects of a startup. So I joined early on, but not like super early. So like in the I think like they had like 20 something employees then.
Wow. So that's still small.
Yeah, still pretty small. We had just raised a Series B in venture capital funding. So it was early on to like make to be able to feel like you're making a big impact. And like I stayed there for a while until it exited. So like by the time we exited, like was one of the more senior people there. And really what I liked about a startup is that like I could choose any part of the product to work on as long as like doing
being useful.
Being useful. So that was kind of the company was very good about that, like shoehorned into one thing.
Okay.
And then I was able to, like meet a bunch of customers and do presentations, things like that. So they were very supportive of that and encouraging of that. So
that's interesting. So you were a software engineer, and I guess the typical, let's say if we do put a stereotype to it, is typically, hey, I don't want to talk to people, I just want to code. Yeah. But it seems like you did leverage this human facing or customer facing aspect to be like, hey, let me go see how this thing works in the real world. Who is using it? What are they doing with it? So tell us about maybe why you took that particular path versus just staying purely in engineering and not interacting with customers as much.
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. Like, I don't consider myself like a people person per se, but I
super
think
extrovert and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
But I do draw energy from like bouncing ideas of people. And
I see.
actually what I found is that like, I like, discussing, technical things internally and like even, product things internally in the company. And I found for my career and what I wanted to do is that like, I actually needed to be able to explain what I'm doing, elucidate my ideas. And then at the startup, like our CEO, like if I give a presentation to internally, he would be like, this is great. Let's go. I want you to talk to the customer because they're
Okay.
tired hearing from me, So
Mm-hmm.
you will be able to present this. And like, so in that sense, like I was really lucky to have a supportive executive staff who
Yes.
were happy and willing to put you in front of customers.
Mm-hmm.
And there were definitely software engineers at the company who didn't want to do that.
Okay.
But
and do you think that separated you from the pack in terms of when the executive leadership were looking at people to start new things or handle different types of projects? Did your name maybe rise to the top because you were willing to push into the customer facing realm a bit?
I think so, yeah. I think that skill set or that ability and willingness definitely plays a big part. I think you are kind of capped a little bit if you don't want to go into that realm. And I think it's okay. There are like a lot of jobs in that regard. Like, you can go work at large companies and never see
Speak to
customers.
customers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or do kind of individual projects. It's just more a personal preference of like whether you want to be able to go into that realm. And for me, that has helped in also being able to, move teams, move companies as well, because you make those connections, but you're also able to, explain the work that you've done and like your ideas. So I think it helps in that regard.
And also who's valued your work as well, right? So I've worked on this project, X amount of customers have, you've delivered a certain amount of value, be it from a revenue perspective, customer acquisition. And that's kind of one of my hidden agendas with this show, is to at least highlight the customer facing opportunities in tech, in machine learning. So I'm more of a customer facing data scientist. If you put me in a lab with, a ton of PhDs, I'll be like behind them, like, hey, kind of what's going on. That's just not, I guess, what excites me. But put me in front of a customer, put me in front of anybody to either showcase the value of some machine learning product or discuss technical problems. And that personally gets me more excited. And at least in my short experience so far, that has been a big separator, I would say, or key defining feature that has allowed me to at least distinguish myself from other data scientists in industry, and I think progress me a lot faster than usual.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's great that you found that about yourself and been able to, play to those strengths.
Great. And I guess maybe it's probably a good time to ask that question. Is the thesis is we're from the Caribbean and we're very accustomed seeing people from many different races, cultures, and that natively we've sort of lived that. And from there, I think it allows us to relate to many different types of people a lot easier than maybe other cultures. And have you found some of that upbringing from the Caribbean, more specifically Trinidad, has allowed you to interface with different teams, people from different backgrounds? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it does help because in some regard, like, you have already like put yourself out a little bit by just being in that environment, like we are, either outside Trinidad or in an environment where there are not a lot of people from the place that you are from. So
yes.
And we are, representing something unique and, smaller. So I think we kind of naturally do that, bridge building and, telling people about ourselves, sharing a little bit about ourselves, listening and learning from other people. So we have already stepped outside our comfort zone a little. So I feel like, it does lend itself there.
And along your journey, have you met different people from the Caribbean in these companies and sort of struck up a relationship with them, at least through that background?
Yes, yeah. So at NetApp there were a couple other trainees, a few Jamaicans, etc. So having that community there was useful as well to, you know, like have people that, you know, but in general, yeah, I think like our multicultural, you know, nature helps a lot with being able to interact with a lot of people from different walks of life, different immigrants, etc.
Great. So you got acquired by VMware and you're in VMware. You're a staff engineer. And I think for maybe, at least in school, I didn't know what the hell a staff engineer was. Now that I'm in industry, I understand sort of what quite high of a level that is. So can you tell us about the difference between like a senior software engineer and a staff engineer? And then you get into principal. I don't know, is principal below staff, or principal is probably below staff, right? Correct?
It is above staff at VMware.
It is above. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about staff engineers and what does that mean in terms of levels that people can work towards?
Yeah. So staff engineer is like one of they call it like a terminal position, in the sense that like you don't like automatically get promotions after that, because it's kind of a staff engineers, you know, like you kind of on retainer with the company. So you're hired not for a particular skill set or expertise. You're hired because, you know, you've distinguished yourself as someone that the company wants to keep, and they, you know, try to match you with projects that you want, etc. But really it's a certain level of leadership that they think you can generally bring to kind of any software team within the company. So that's generally how I look at it. In terms of roles and responsibilities, it may vary depending on, you know, size of team, etc. So in my kind of current small startup type team, it's, you know, like everyone kind of has the, you know, day-to-day coding, etc. But you're expected as the lead to, you know, bring leadership to it and mentor along some of the other folks.
Yes.
In really large teams, you may just be, you know, guiding, you know, leading design reviews. A large part of it at big companies, I realize, is just helping steer people away from making the wrong decision. So it might not be that you have a great idea, but you've seen enough bad ideas or bad execution to know that, hey, like we shouldn't do it this way.
Okay.
Because I think that's the biggest cost to big companies is, you know, doing a project that would be unsuccessful and investing a certain amount of time and engineers into a problem space that, you know, is not going to work out. So
yes. Okay. That's a knowing what not to do. And I haven't heard probably too many people highlight that particular aspect of innovation or new product development. And kind of tell us some of your management principles that you guide your team with, given that, you know, you've been doing it for a while in the startup environment. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I haven't like had direct reports as like a people manager, but I've always kind of been like in like lead roles or mentoring roles. So it's a little bit easier because I don't have to deal with like day-to-day management issues. But I would say the most important thing is making sure that people feel like they're learning and growing. You know, like in the software industry, in the tech industry, everyone is so mobile in terms of, you know, like choosing a job they want, etc. So someone working for your company is someone who you want to be there, right? Because, you know, if you try to make them do something they don't want to do or they are not interested in, then with the freedom of movement, you know, they are able to move to whatever company or things that interest them. So the biggest thing that retains people is being happy and motivated at work, and being able to continually develop. So keeping that in mind, like how that translates is to at a lot of companies, especially like being able to retain talent is even more important than, you know, like being able to deliver a product 1 month early or like pushing something out by 1 month, etc. So avoiding, like burning out people, rewarding and recognizing people, I think are important.
Aspects as well, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's sometimes at big companies, it gets lost because things are not as visible, etc. But being kind of able to recognize what motivates people, what kind of recognition and reward people appreciate in your team, whether it's, like a shout out, like if you doing a demo, if I do a demo as a lead, like I want to make sure and shout out the person that, did this piece of work, etc. There are people who, might not want the public recognition, but, when it's promotion time, they count on you to write a good promotion packet, etc. for them. So yeah, so being able to kind of navigate through that is important.
Do you find, or have you experienced where people might not shout out others for fear that that person getting recognition, especially like when you're on similar levels or even someone possibly below your level, you're not necessarily shouting them out or giving them as much public praise because someone may be concerned that their reputation gets pushed down. Have you maybe experienced some of that in any culture?
Yeah, I think so. And like I've tried to stay away kind of from management chains that do that. But you you definitely see that like style of leadership sometimes where like individual recognition doesn't come true for whatever reason. Either like the person at the higher level just wants to reflect it on themselves, or they don't want to offend anyone else in the team. But I think for me, being in teams that do individual recognition is important because I've seen the rewards from it, like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So you finished, well, you're at NetApp, excuse me, at VMware. And can you tell us about kind of like your day-to-day? Are you doing a ton of machine learning yourself? Are you coding a lot? Python? Are you doing, let's say, distributed model training, multiple GPUs, no GPUs in the cloud? Tell us kind of what that environment is like.
Yeah, so right now we are 4 months into this like stealth project, but we're dealing with like the intersection of security and ML, one particular problem space in there. So my team consists of me as the lead software generalist person and two machine learning kind of specific folks. So one of them, he has a master's in data science machine learning field, and then the other person, she just finished her PhD in a specific part of machine learning. So they definitely have the like ML chops in the team. But both of them are like a little have traditionally done kind of more research projects. This is the first like customer
production
level thing. So we use a lot of Python in our stack for the ML piece. So we what I primarily focus on is having a SaaS ML component. So like SaaS is software as a service, so something that runs in the cloud 24/7, but does machine learning. So like we get data in and we kind of give results out in real time. So we do like live inference on customer data.
Okay. And so you're building all of the pipelines. Are you containerizing it, putting it in the cloud as well?
Yes.
Yeah. In Kubernetes and all the fun stuff, Docker.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. And of course, as like security and ML like are sometimes like a little bit at odds with each other because we are collecting sensitive customer data. So we are like trying to develop interesting solutions with like federated machine learning to like have not raw data leave the customer data site, but instead like being able to like develop a model on in the customer environment and communicate model weights back to our SaaS backend, etc. So we are like initially doing some exploration there as well.
Great. And I think federated learning will become probably more of a standard moving forward, where people don't want to send their data to you. Right. You basically come train locally on my data, and then leave with your model, but not my data.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so in the last segment of the podcast, we've dove fairly deep into your career so far and kind of understood the different hops as you left MIT all the way now to VMware and understanding sort of what are staff engineers, and you've been doing machine learning or helping to build machine learning systems this whole time. And you do seem very passionate about what it is that you're doing. Can you give anyone any advice around maybe continuing to cultivate that passion as you go along? You did mention that being surrounded by really sharp folks in your field helps a lot. Anything else you think that you practice to keep going?
Yeah, so I would kind of reiterate like the try looking at open source projects and seeing how you can contribute. It's a great way to learn new languages, new technologies in like a hands-on way. And then my advice kind of in general is like now more than ever, you don't like necessarily need a computer science degree or anything like that to get into some of these tech fields and data science, ML fields. And, so there are a number of like approachable languages and frameworks. You can get started, learn Python on your own, learn R, etc., and be able to do like interesting projects. And they are so wide ranging that you can build something that interests you. Like if your hobby is sports, like you can easily go build like something that predicts like number of goals that should have been scored in this game, or etc. Right? So we see a lot of that exploding, and I would say like try to find something fun that you would use and interest you, and build out to
that particular field.
Yeah.
Great. So what two pieces of advice do you have for a high schooler, someone in college, and a professional? And this could be general advice, like life advice. It could be things that maybe you've learned in your career, but just for them to accelerate whatever it is that they decide to do.
Yeah. So I think for a high schooler, I would say the doors are kind of more open than ever in terms of, I see a lot of high schoolers now, they would like even reach out to me like, which subject should I take, etc. Right? And my advice to them is like, take what you are interested in and don't obsess too much about, like how this lines me up for like a future job, because I think that's like more unclear now than ever, like in terms of the subjects you take in high school to the job you end up with is a little bit different. So take things you enjoy, and then also like don't worry too much about prefer like general things over like niche things. So
you can adapt to different domains and things like that. Okay.
Yeah. I would also say a lot of schools, at least when I was there, was offering like IT or Spanish. I would take IT.
Yes.
So
and that's the future, right? It's one of the components of the future.
Yeah, I think my sister teaches IT at Naprima Girls, and it's still a small class size, etc. But I would kind of encourage broadly to. I think IT should kind of be IT and computer science should be like more widely taught, because a lot of people just don't have exposure to it, so they don't even know if they like it or not, if it matches their skill set. They make certain assumptions that like I won't like it because of X, Y, or Z. Yes. But there's a lot more to IT and computer science than just programming, right? Product management, the customer facing roles, etc. Being able to understand tech,
troubleshooting, all the damn stuff that could be a whole it's a whole career in itself, right?
Yes. So so that's kind of my advice to high schoolers. To college students, I would say for me, what in my experience, I kind of worried about grades a lot at MIT, which looking back on it now, like I think like I would have tried taking more classes that seemed interesting, as opposed to trying to optimize for a certain GPA or things like that.
So you're trying to bank all the A's, so your GPA would have been higher.
Yeah, and like the amount of times people ask about your GPA like after college is like it's like not that much. Like you might want a certain good GPA to get into, graduate programs, etc. So I'm not saying like it's completely useless, but in terms of industry, like really you want to set yourself up for success more by finding things that interest you and like learning in those regards. So
Yep.
don't over rotate on thinking about GPA or grades or graduating with honors and stuff. Even like I think and also like the MIT helped open a lot of doors for me, but I really feel like a lot of talented people I've worked with have gone to a wide range of schools, and
Yes.
That to me, like, it doesn't correlate strongly with like how talented, how productive people become in their career with like the name of the school that they went to. Like I
Yes.
would say MIT opened doors for me, but it doesn't mean that like I think it set me up more for success. I think
That's interesting. Okay, that's good for at least the students maybe listening that probably might not get the opportunity to go to a top school like MIT, and they probably go to maybe a smaller school like myself. And I think that's one thing I was always aware of, given that I went to a smaller school, and the brand recognition of a Harvard, a Yale, and MIT when you get into industry. And I think I'd said in my head, like, okay, I need to work a lot harder just to make sure that people know, hey, even though I didn't go there, you could still perform really well in industry, right?
Right. Yeah. And us being from the Caribbean and smaller countries, like we shouldn't feel like we don't belong in these spaces. Like we have a lot of success in these spaces, and I think like increasingly we're trying to make more tech more meritocracy based, as opposed to like coming from schools of recognizable name, etc. So
Yep.
Definitely don't let any of those things stop you from applying to certain jobs, etc. So
Great. And now that you're a staff engineer, so that means that you're providing a tremendous amount of value for one of the. I've learned that VMware is the top company in the compute virtualizing space. Like, there's really no big competitor, I would say, seriously, to VMware. And what advice do you have for professionals around advancing their career, especially in tech as a software engineer? And now you're a machine learning focused software engineer, it seems.
Yeah, I think as a professional in tech and in software, you want to make sure that you always remain adaptable. You can become a specialist in certain areas, but even specialists, like the tech stack changes so often. Like if you are in ML or data science, like you may learn a certain framework or like become very adept at it, but in 3 or 4 years, there may be a better framework.
New framework.
So you want to make sure you put yourself in a position to know about these things, to hear about them, and to be able to lead your team or like your industry in that space, right? So don't be afraid of what's new. And I do see a lot of software engineers kind of like bury their heads as they become professionals.
Okay.
So always keep your head kind of up and looking at new things, trying new things. So like tangibly, what I would say is, like go to conferences or watch conference talks, continue to, read articles and papers and tech blogs.
Just to keep your mind sort of churning on the new stuff.
Yeah. And
Great.
then the other thing I would tell professionals, is to don't discount like we talked about a little bit, don't discount the softer skills and the people aspect of it, both in terms of, customer facing, but also, your fellow employees and junior folks as well, like being able to mentor. Like these are all things that are force multipliers within a company. Like me being able to successfully mentor 5 junior engineers has huge value to the company. And me being able to like interact or sell my ideas to a customer, that has huge value as well, right? So I think don't don't discount that. And tied to that is, like that's why we're trying to make like the tech industry more diverse and equitable and inclusive towards, women and underrepresented minorities, etc. So don't become one of those software engineers who is not like anti-DE&I, but like not embracing the effort. Like the effort does move the industry forward because it is bringing more people on board. It's becoming a better work environment. Don't become like a tech bro.
Okay, yeah. Right? Just be cool, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Welcome new people to this space.
Yeah.
So my last two questions would be, what are three principles you live by? And one of the reasons I like to ask this question is everyone at different stages in their career, different stages in life, right? It's not only work, where we are people and we've learned different things over that period of time. So what are things that guide you in your life, and share that with the audience?
Yeah, I think one thing that guides me in my life is like realize the things that bring you value in life. And it's like deeper than at a material level. Like it's easy to get stuck into the cycle of I'm making money to make more money to get promoted, etc. So for me, one big thing is realizing the things that bring you value and joy, and realizing what when you are sacrificing those for things that bring you less value and joy, right? So I know people in my company even who, they don't take time off because they think that, this product is not going to ship on time, but they don't realize that they're burning themselves out. So burnout is, kind of a real thing. And I would say take time and really cherish the things that you value in life, and whether that's like, time with family, travel, things like that. So definitely do that. I would say also, generally, you want to be a nice person and like a good person at heart. So I think like that, essentially, like think about like why we are on this earth, and like why we do the things that we do, and like really is all about like coexisting happily with other people, right? So
yes,
if you are doing things that actively take you away from that path, question it deeply. Things like if you are doing something either in work or in life that is making people unhappy, or promoting yourself above others,
yes,
then like question that, I would say. So
great. And what are three books you recommend? And this doesn't have to be technical. It could be technical, but things that you may have read over time that have left an impact on your life.
Yeah, so I would say there's the three books. So one, I would say the Nelson Mandela autobiography, so A Long Walk to Freedom. It's a very long book, but it does, capture the details of the life of, someone legendary who brought about change, who evaluated and struggled with different ways to bring about change. So definitely recommend reading that. Another book is called Endurance. So Endurance was about journey to Antarctica that went wrong, and this man and his team needed to be able to find the mindset to survive, and they miraculously did. But it is a book of great strength. And then kind of as the third book, so this is one recommended to me by my brother, and he is into these type of books. It's called Deep Work.
Yeah.
So
that book is serious.
Yeah.
My boss, my first boss on NVIDIA made me read that. He's like, that's your assignment before you come here.
Yeah.
And I think for anyone listening, if there's one book you're going to read, it's probably that one, at least for if you're in the tech field. Yeah. In terms of honing in on a technical skill.
Yeah. Deep Work is, I would say like everyone especially in tech should read it, because tech is a field that, you can get like pulled in a bunch of different directions, and you end up, not being able to focus and do deep work and reap the benefits of it. So yeah.
Great. Dennis, I appreciate your time so far. Is there anything else you wanted the audience to know? Oh, let's talk about cricket. So, what role does cricket sort of play in your life? And I've spoken to different people on the podcast, and some, cricket really meant a lot for them, especially older folks who had lived through the great heyday of the West Indies. And what does it mean to you as part of your life? Because you have the flag behind you and everything.
Yes. So growing up, I loved all sports really, but cricket was especially something that I loved a lot, and particularly because I think like the way it helped forge a connection between me and my grandfather on my mom's side and my mom. They were both, cricket lovers, never miss a test match type. And for me, it was something that it was interesting to see, these small islands do extremely well on a world stage. And
yes,
I missed kind of the heyday. So like I was born in 86. So kind of the later parts of, we still had greats, but not a great team. So it was a tougher follow. But I used to love, as soon as tickets went on sale for any match at the Oval, like I would be begging my father, like, let me go line up, buy tickets, etc. So for me, many great memories of, spending days at the Oval. I find cricket to be, even like the test cricket, like taking a day of test cricket, it is a day out, it's a good experience.
Right.
You go with your pillow, you go with your shawl, etc. So, and then cricket has so many great memories of like days at the Oval, etc. Playing cricket during school, like at NAPS, I remember we had, like 2 pitches down on the field, but during, it was quite competitive to be able to go play on those. So we used to have people, run out of class 2 minutes early to go like reserve.
To go holy pitch and everything.
Yeah. So,
nice.
So we had some cricket folks like that. And then actually when the World Cup was in the Caribbean, me and, so at that point I was at MIT, and I really wanted to come see some games. I unfortunately broke my leg that spring, but I still went to the games in Antigua. So me and my best friend from Trinidad and my sister went to a few games in Antigua.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, and unfortunately, West Indies got knocked out, but
that's rough. Yeah, that and you broke. Well, at least you went over there and you had a good experience anyway. Yeah. And one of the other reasons I asked about cricket, I think Dr. Kokaram was sort of sharing how he has met so many interesting people because he's involved in cricket.
Yeah.
And that's a passion of his. Have you had that type of experience as well? Even though you're in San Francisco, there's a large population of people from the British colonies. Have you connected with people through cricket to some degree?
Yeah, definitely. I think like, being from the Caribbean and from Trinidad, like a surprising number of people have never even heard of Trinidad, right? So when you tell them where you're from, I'm from Trinidad, but you look Indian, blah, blah, blah. But when you say from Trinidad, then like the next thing I say is, like part of West Indies, and they're like, oh, Brian Lara, and then I immediately make that connection. So I think like for me, it does help people understand who I am and where I'm from. And also, like a deeper level, being able to hang out and watch cricket and things like that. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Once again, I appreciate your time and thanks for sharing your story. And for those listening, I hope you take some of the lessons that Dennis has shared today and go forth and do some cool things for machine learning and tech.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot, Mark. And it's great having this discussion with you.
Definitely. Appreciate your time. Later.
All right, later. Bye.
Bye.